Hello, I'm Bruce Feldman, Lofeld Consulting Group Vice President for Artificial Intelligence. We've been monitoring the pace of adoption of generative AI in the GovCon community for the last year and a half. We'd like to share with you some observations today that we've gained from our own experience, as well as broad industry experience, and also the results from a series of polls we've taken of GovCon companies and what they're experiencing with their early adoption of generative AI. Now, first of all, it's important that you know that Lofeld Consulting Group does not develop or sell generative AI platforms. We're a capture and proposal services support company. We provide trained experts to help you write more and better winning bids. So I come at this opportunity from the point of view of the user of generative AI. We've been experimenting with and deploying AI trained proposal experts for over a year and a half now. We've learned a lot, both from our own experience and from research into the field. What you're looking at right now are the results from a Deloitte Global survey of C-suite executives on how they feel about the adoption of generative AI, in particular for business development and proposal-related work. What you can see from these early adopters is that nearly 50% of the survey respondents are moving fast with adoption. They are already believers in what generative AI can do for them, both in terms of efficiency and in terms of generating more and better proposal content. Having said that, most of these organizations are very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the results they've experienced to date. But there's more work to be done, and clearly, we're seeing the trickle-down impact of generative AI in the enterprise because companies are adjusting their hiring strategies to bring more people on and to shape their workforce to reflect the use of generative AI more and more in the workplace. Now, a recent Gartner survey of generative AI users projects that we've really reached the peak of the hype cycle for Gen AI and now are sliding into the trough of disillusionment, where companies are discouraged by their initial experience of generative AI. It's been a very rapid evolution considering the technology is less than 2 years old. However, looking at an APMP survey done in August of this year, we see that 60% of companies are finding that generative AI adoption has generated benefit to their enterprise. Some of them find it exceed expectations, some find it meets most of their needs, some see room for improvement. That's not a surprise. But fewer than 40% are stating that generative AI has really disappointed them in terms of not delivering on expected benefits. Now, if we ask ourselves why these early adopters, only 20% are seeing that generative AI meets or exceeds their expectations. I would propose that the reason for that is because companies have not brought on a full-fledged AI adoption blueprint. People have rushed the technology, they've run pilots, they've experimented, they've seen the demonstrations from the vendors. But what have they actually done to prepare their workforce properly for AI adoption so that you meet the expectations that have been laid upon you by the vendors? The tools are amazing. They write beautifully, they process data, they accept data. They really do incredible things. But your people need to know how to use these tools well. And you need to know how to integrate these tools into your workplace enterprise infrastructure if you're going to realize the value that you hope to from adoption of generative AI. If you look at these 8 factors for your AI adoption blueprint, you'll realize that only 3 of these are really engineering intensive in terms of platform selection. Those items are the make, buy, and lease decision. How are you going to acquire the capability? How are you going to host it in your environment so that it's secure, you're immune to leakage and to penetration? And also, you need to be able to give the tool access to your corporate data in a way that is secure and that is under your control. But 5 of these cases have to do with how you actually adopt and bring generative AI into your enterprise in terms of people, processes, and procedures. Those factors, I would contend, have really been underestimated. Companies have not invested in parallel sufficiently with the adoption of the tool itself, with getting their people ready for change. What I'd like to do is give you a brief review and refresher on the expectations we have for AI adoption for GovCon BD work, proposal and capture related work, rewards, costs, and risks. I want to share with you the results of a series of Lofeld surveys of GovCon users of generative AI for business development purposes. We realized a number of results and expectations that are very much consistent with Lofeld's actual experience of its consultants working with our industry customers. I'll share some of those with you as well, and then draw for you some summary level conclusions. So here are some things we've learned in the last really less than 2 years of using generative AI to help us with GovCon business development. First of all, we see the potential for increased win rate as well as reduced proposal cost. You can improve the quality of your bids and also be more cost effective and more efficient in preparing your bids so you can bid more. Those in turn will drive revenue improvement. We understand the major cost drivers for generative AI platform adoption. It's deciding what kind of a platform you're going to buy and how you're going to acquire the capability, whether or not you make it internally, whether or not you purchase a platform, or you choose to lease a platform through software as a service or a similar type of investment. How you choose to host in your business infrastructure, be it virtual private cloud, be it in your in-house IT infrastructure, or some other means, that's really up to you. Again, a significant cost driver. And then how do you give the generative AI secure access to your proprietary and sensitive data? If you're going to write high quality winning proposals, you need to be able to differentiate your offering from your competitors. The most effective way to use GenAI is to give it access to your proprietary data so it can incorporate that directly into the content that it generates. Having said that, that access needs to be secure. These are the three major cost drivers we've experienced to date with companies that are adopting AI. Having said that, there are a number of hidden costs that have begun to emerge. You need to be prepared to speak to those as well and to understand how to invest in parallel in your people as well as in the platform itself. Some of those costs are organizational change management. How are you going to communicate, train, upskill your workforce, adapt your processes, adapt the GenAI to your processes? All of those are components of organizational change management. You're going to realize opportunity cost for your in-house labor. You may have to create new positions. You may have to divert resources from your in-house AI practice or from your system administration and support services practice as well in order to support a new platform and really a new technology. And then you may experience some volatility in pricing. If you are pricing based on token usage, for example, you may see a very different utilization and cost profile than if you say lease a capability based on the number of proposals or just in terms of providing you with a secure tenant for your use. As the system continues to evolve, as AI adoption becomes more prevalent and more routine, I think that volatility will settle down. But right now, there's the potential for rapid pricing and packaging evolution that will drive price change and cost change for you. And when it comes time to acquire the platform, you're going to find that that is the single major cost driver in terms of acquiring the platform capability. You have a number of choices to make. You can build your own platform, do it all in-house from scratch, or using a public foundational model, as they're called, like a ChatGPT or a Google Gemini or an Anthropic Claude. Those are three of the models that are most popular, but certainly by no means all of them. There are a number of open source models, Metalama, Mistral, a number of others. You can tie one of those into your corporate enterprise infrastructure and then build the software that's necessary to integrate in-house internally. You can buy a model, bring it in, install it in your workplace, integrate it with your systems, or you can lease capability where you are provided GenAI capability through a software as a service, again, or as a similar acquisition type of a model. And there are advantages and disadvantages to each of these, and that's not really the purpose of what I want to speak to you about today. I would like to note that if you choose to do the make decision, if you choose to build the platform internally, you're going to find that, first of all, the cost to build the platform itself is very high because you're going to have to acquire the hardware, the graphic processing unit or GPUs that are necessary to install in your in-house infrastructure if you're going to do that. And then you're going to have sustainment costs. And if those costs, again, are borne internally, presumably you would be diverting resources that investing in AI, now you're supporting and maintaining a platform, those resources now not available for go-to-market related activities. So that'll be a choice that you have to make to be as cost effective and efficient as possible. Now that spectrum of opportunities ranging from just buy something more or less off the shelf all the way through build it yourself, maintain it yourself is kind of illustrated on this chart here. We have self-managed all the way through provider managed. Okay. Now there are a number of blocks here which have red outlines around them, and those kind of illustrates the roots of where some of these cost drivers come from, because those blocks with the red squares around them show you where you have to invest in data science and AI expertise in-house in order to sustain and operate your model. So the more to which extent you build it yourself, the more of this data science and specialized expertise you're going to have to bring on board in order to prepare your data, maintain the model, do the necessary upgrades, do recurring training. Those things you'd have to do on the far right-hand side of the spectrum. On the other hand, if you go to the other extreme, which is typically much less expensive, you simply acquire the capability, you buy it, or you, again, lease it through a software as a service type of an arrangement. You don't have to bear any of those costs, perhaps, as part of your acquisition package. Okay? But the cost driver is the expertise of the people you need to do these very specific model related activities. So you need to be very aware of those costs you're going to bear, not only in buying the model or acquiring the model or creating an initial operating capability, but also for long-term sustainment, not only of the model itself and the accompanying software, but also the data library and the data inputs that you will have to maintain. That is no small thing, especially if you're using a model where you're doing fine tuning and you have to engage in data science activities to repeatedly curate and manage the data you're going to use for the next generation of fine tuning. And at the same time, if you're doing fine tuning, your data is never really up to date because once you fine tune and finish fine tuning the model, the data is now up to date. Now, until your next fine tuning opportunity, the data in the model continues to age out because it's not being kept current on things that have occurred past its training date. So I've talked about the make, buy, lease decision, which I think is the single biggest cost driver in acquiring the capability. You're also going to have to decide how you want to host the platform. You're going to do it, and I say on premise, it could be in your virtual private cloud, or it could be in a GovCloud certified type of an environment, or it could be in your in-house data IT infrastructure. It's very much up to you. Some surveys on what the industry is doing shows that less than a third are using their internal network. Over 70% are using a model provider endpoint, as they call it, an interface to a model through a virtual private cloud or the equivalent of that. That's really up to you. The advantage of the virtual private cloud, if you go with a commercial cloud, is you don't have to go buy the hardware. The existing cybersecurity protections are already in place, but there are absolutely costs attached to doing that. Now, when it comes to giving generative AI access to your corporate data, the industry is kind of settling on two different approaches. By the way, you can have a hybrid approach where you do both as well. I know of at least one vendor that's doing that. You can fine tune the model, which means going in and actually changing the information inside of the large language model that is at the core of the generative AI platform. You get great performance by doing that, but you have to condition and prepare the data every time you do a fine tuning event. And once the fine tuning is done, it's as if the model has been trained again. Now the data starts no longer being current until the next training event occurs. So it does age out, if you will. Alternatively, you can use retrieval augmented generation, which is a semantic search technique that, as part of your overall software architecture of the system, you can build an enterprise data library. You can search it, you can retrieve information, which you pull back in and combine with your prompt, your input to the generative AI. You get very, very good performance with that. I've worked with that extensively. And at the same time, you don't bear nearly the cost of retraining a large language model. You build an enterprise data library. You have to do some very modest conditioning where you vectorize the knowledge base, have a vector searchable database. But having said that, having done that, that information can be maintained up to really almost up to the minute if you choose to go that way. Now, what is seeing from industry? A number of companies, almost 75%, are fine-tuning their GenAI models. I think a lot of that statistic is reflected in the fact that companies are using open source models. The Meta model Llama is a great example of that. I know OpenAI just came out with their first fine-tunable version of ChatGPT as well, where you can actually go in and change the innards of the processing of the model itself. I think a number of companies have chosen to experiment with that. We'll see ultimately where the vendor community settles and where the user community settles on their choice. Roughly 25%, not quite 25%, are using retrieval augmented generation. And again, we portrayed that in the survey as distinctive two alternative paths. That makes no attempt to account for what percentage are doing both, have a hybrid solution for their data, doing both fine tuning and providing a retrieval augmented generation capability. So what are some of the risks and mitigations that we're seeing with adoption of generative AI to use for GovCon business development related activities? Now, first of all, There's concern in the government that they're going to be inundated with mediocre Gen AI created bids. It's going to be really incumbent upon us in the industry to make sure that we generate bids. If we choose to use generative AI, okay, make sure that we are still showing off the best value our company can deliver by differentiating our offering. What is really unique and best about our corporate offering? As the government considers measures to prevent themselves from being inundated again with mediocre Gen AI created content, you're going to need your contract executive for your company to speaking to their government counterparts about how Gen AI can be a force for good in generating proposal content and doing capture related work for bids. And the government can set in place reasonable measures to prevent people from just cranking out really mediocre content. You are going to have to invest appropriately in organizational change management. We're going to talk extensively about this in the remainder of today's session. That means that your chief HR officer, your chief people officer, is going to have to be involved in how you are going to adapt Gen AI to your workforce and commensurately adapt your workforce to generative AI. That means retraining, it means upskilling, it means creating new labor categories, it may mean changing the proportions of different skills in your workforce environment. You're going to have to be aware of and train your workforce to prevent incorrect assertions, what I would call hallucinations. That's the technical term that the community uses. But really, Gen AI's tendency to create and make incorrect assertions in its narrative, in generated narrative. You're going to have a corporate risk officer or somebody in comparable position who's going to ensure that the quality control on your bids where you've used generative AI doesn't result in incorrect assertions being made, because a contract or proposal is a contractually binding document that your company submits to the government. You don't want to be in a position where you are given an award, which is incorrect assertions in it, factually incorrect statements in it, and then wind up having an award rescinded because you can't live up to the promises that Gen AI made for you. It's incumbent on the company to take ownership of the final product and check it. And then there's always concern about compromise of proprietary data or personally identifiable information or related similar sensitive data, either leaking out or being poisoned, being compromised from the external. Obviously, your CIO or your chief data officer is going to be very, very involved in how you mitigate and address those risks as well. And then there are very much forward-looking risks to deal with as well. So for instance, if you adopt AI, generative AI for your enterprise, and it turns out to be hugely popular, which we're seeing in some places that as people realize the power of these tools, you start doing more and more things with them. How will you scale? How will you project and make the necessary investments to satisfy the demand signal for increased use of generative AI across your enterprise? So we at Lofeld over the last year have been polling extensively on industry adoption of generative AI to do proposal and capture related work. I'd like to share some of those results and draw some conclusions and observations about them to share with you about what we're seeing from those folks who are early adopters or not of generative AI. Now, I think it's worth noting from an APMP survey that we did earlier this year in May of 2024, we're seeing really over 70% of companies are already somewhere in their generative AI adoption journey. I think people really understand the power of the capability. What is really varying is to what extent companies feel comfortable with it and how they're choosing to deploy it, what they're learning about AI adoption, getting these very early stages. Yes, we may have passed the peak of the hype cycle. I think it's premature to say that we're moving into the trough of disillusionment. What's really happening is we're learning how to make these tools work because the power in them is self-evident. Now, one key factor, and I'm going to again speak to this more here as we go through the briefing. Your investment in organizational change management is critical. Now, I've read a McKinsey study and said that your investment cost might be 3 times the cost of your Gen AI model. I think that multiplier is probably high. But having said that, it's clear that if you're going to bring AI into your workforce, you must prepare your workforce for that adoption through organizational change management investment. You can't bring in the tool, train 3 or 4 people, and then say, okay, we're ready to go, no more investment in our workforce required. So we at Lofeld have put together a Gen AI adoption roadmap. These are the items listed on the roadmap. We've got 8 of them. This does not mean that you have to perform them sequentially. Okay? These are things you have to do. They'll have different timelines, different start points, different endpoints. Some of them will be sustaining through the life of the program. Some of them can be, done and completed. You can declare victory at some point. But the main thing is you need to think these things through and be prepared to make these investments if you want to use generative AI cost effectively and efficiently to, again, win more and bid more. So, for example, one of our roadmap items is before you invest in generative AI adoption, you should define your value proposition. What is it you hope to achieve as an outcome and as a benefit to your enterprise from the adoption itself? Now, to give you one example of a benefit that you can realize from generative AI adoption, you can save money. You can reduce the cost of the average proposal. Now, we've seen from companies that we surveyed in May of this year is that more than 50% of the companies that we survey have already seen in a technology that's less than 2 years old and already being adopted, they're seeing 25% or more savings in the cost of writing proposals. Now, certainly a significant percentage saw less than that in savings. About 44% saw 25% or fewer savings, less savings. But having said that, we have to ask ourselves, for those companies that are not saving what we hope would be kind of the benchmark of about 30%, to what extent have they prepared their people and their enterprise to use AI as efficiently and cost effectively as possible? I think as workforces become more prepared, better equipped, as they adapt their procedures and learn how to use GenAI in a way that is consonant with their best practices, those savings are going to continue to increase. Now, it's clear that you're going to have to work with your chief financial officer to build a business case for bringing generative AI into the enterprise because it has a lot of different cost impacts. I've just given you one example here of a survey asking companies how much do they expect to invest in generative AI adoption. Now, that's just, is it over the life of the program? Is it for a year? Is it for 5 years? That remains to be seen. But a significant fraction of these companies, almost over 30%, are expecting to spend $500,000 or more. That's, I think, a pretty high number for the overall investment. What we really need to ask ourselves is, based on how we're going to acquire the capability, are we going to do make? Are we going to do buy? Are we going to do lease? Then what should our investment expectations be? And I'm saying that here in the right-hand side of the chart. We have to consider the acquisition model, what our sustainment cost is going to be, and how long will it take till we see the return on the investment in the AI? Because again, we're going to be writing proposals. We're going to be waiting on award notifications from customers, typically the government in our business, GovCon, to be federal, state, or local. Sometimes those returns can come in a month. Sometimes those returns can take years to realize if we have an extended bid and then protest and award evaluation cycle. So we have to think carefully about the business case, not only in terms of how much we're going to invest, how we amortize potentially some of those costs over multiple years, but also how long will it take to we see that payback on the investment and we see positive margin, positive impact on the company, receiving return on investment in terms of reward and profit increasing enough to justify the initial investment. You also notice that almost 40% of the companies we survey expected to spend $50,000 or less on generative AI adoption. I think that number is too low. That's just my personal subjective opinion. I don't think you can acquire this capability, even for a year, let's say, with enough people to reach critical mass inside your corporate enterprise, plus enough to pay for the organizational change management costs and investments you're going to have to make in your people and your processes. So I think a 50K expectation is probably too low, but I think a 500K expectation really speaks to going up to the upper end of the spectrum and how you're going to acquire and pay for the model itself. Now, one of the things that we've realized through both industry surveys and through our own experience here at Lofeld Consulting is that these tools are so popular, you will find that use cases are going to proliferate. People are going to come back to you with all kinds of ideas to how to use generative AI to do more things, to integrate into your processes, to automate tasks, to make extensive writing tasks shorter, faster, better, cheaper, all those sorts of things. You're going to want to focus on a limited number of use cases. Pick a modest number, I would say 5 to 10 use cases initially, probably not more than that. I would be thinking about using a BD maturity model to look for high impact areas in your processes inside your company for BD where you can see the greatest impact from applying generative AI and focus on the use cases that will help you reduce time and cost in those particular process areas. Now, in terms of seeing current applications of GenAI, the survey itself is consistent with Lowfeld consulting experience over the last year and a half working with our customers. Many people, almost half, are using it to shorten long narratives. And I say shorten long narratives, I mean, you can actually put a narrative into GenAI and say, now create me a summary, create me an extract, specify an approximate length that you want for that result. And it will do that very nicely for you. And it does it in seconds, not the minutes or hours it might take a human being, even a highly skilled one, to do that revision. About a third of companies are finding that they're using it for outlines and first drafts. That's their principal use case. And again, a very powerful area for generative AI because it has such great facility with language. I know people are using it for CRM automation, for capturing the data that's going to go into your customer relationship management system, or to automate the outputs from it, some of the reporting from it. And then there's a small fraction using it for other kind of miscellaneous tasks related to that. This is really just scraping the surface of what generative AI can do because it's facility not only with language, but also with analysis and synthesis of written information. So an area of exploitation, I think that's really still yet to be tapped is how do we use generative AI for capture-related work, where so often we're dealing with integration of large, diverse sets of data in order to focus on key points that will help us create the winning ideas, the winning solution ideas, the winning strategy ideas, the winning theme ideas that we can then inject into our proposal process. So I've mentioned a number of times the importance of organizational change management. How are you going to get your workforce and your organization ready to use really a new type of technology? Again, generative AI, it's not software, it's not a database where it's deterministic, it's rule following. Generative AI is creative, it's clever, but it's also in some ways undisciplined. It doesn't always do exactly what you want it to do in the way we'd expect if we're querying a database or running a spreadsheet. You've got to get your workforce ready to deal with the implications of that through a variety of techniques, upskilling, communications. You might want to have an immersion program on live bids where people are using the tool under expert supervision to work a live bid. So you're not taking your key people off of live bids to go offline for extended training. You have to build deep understanding of AI, not only in your workforce, but in your leadership team as well. So they appreciate what the investment is and what the return is that you hope to get from adopting generative AI. So we looked at how generative AI is currently being used in organizations in our survey in July of this year. We found in the bid and proposal organization, people are using it for capture and proposal management. I suspect a lot of that is writing related for proposal activity, but people are using it for other things as well. Some companies are using it for project and schedule management. I know the current generation of tools will do schedule management. They'll create Gantt charts. You can do project planning with them. And then 15% again are doing roughly, generative AI related tasks, probably writing memoranda, helping you with analysis of market data, those sorts of things. And also, again, not to be overlooked is orals presentation preparation. One of the things that we believe is a possibility is that the government is going to increasingly rely on orals because they know GenAI is so good at writing. It's going to be easy for companies now, relatively easy for companies to generate written content, all the technical management, transition plans, performance volumes, all that. I think customers are going to insist now more on seeing your bid team in action in an orals environment. Generative AI can help you with that as well by generating scripts, questions, evaluating orals transcripts and giving feedback to the presenters, all those sorts of things. I think companies are beginning to experiment with those sorts of things. So we're already seeing a wide variety of uses. I think we could, we've already at Lowthought established between 40 and 50 use cases already, different things that we're already using GenAI for our customers as well. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that risks and risk mitigations are going to be key to your success with generative AI adoption. In order to proceed with adoption, you're going to have to get buy-in from some of your critical influencers, leadership and decision makers in your enterprise. Your chief financial officer is going to have to believe that you can deliver in the efficiencies and the win rate improvements from your projections. Can you generate bids more cheaply? Can you improve win rate so your overall revenue picture improves? Your CIO is going to have confidence that your data is protected from leakage and corruption, that the costs to sustain the model are manageable and understood, and that we can acquire the talent we need to sustain whatever model we acquire, whatever capability we choose to use, and how we choose it. We're also going to want to be careful to avoid technical debt. It's a very fast-moving field. How do we ensure that the platform we acquire today will be the right platform for us in 5 to 10 years? That's an entirely different but yet related question. Your legal team at your company is going to understand if you have any corporate exposure from using generative AI, and will there be possible future restrictions on its use from government customers or from industry partners who may adopt standards for its use that are different than yours. Your contracts executive, as I mentioned before, is going to want to work carefully with government customers in order to manage how the government chooses to restrict use of generative AI. And then finally, you're going to have to do risk management. You should have a corporate enterprise function which handles risk management. How do you handle reputational and other risks from use of generative AI, in addition to the overall quality control problem related to hallucinations? So we talked in an industry survey, this is actually from September of last year, earlier in the adoption cycle, but still almost a year after generative AI really kind of exploded into everyone's consciousness. Obviously, people were very, very concerned about security and privacy and saw that as a challenge in implementation. How will you protect your data from leakage? And over 70% said, yes, that's a concern. What were the major concerns? Leakage of data, IP theft, privacy violation or leakage, again, PII, personally identifiable information, concerns about bad data being present in the GenAI model itself that could increase hallucination rates, and then really hostile threat activity. And I think most companies now, most of their vendor platforms are working to bolster the security standards to which their platforms are met and which they operate. Now, if your GenAI adoption is going to be effective, you're going to want to have metrics and key performance indicators to make sure that you are proceeding as desired in terms of getting the results that you have committed to when you built your value proposition and your business case for adoption. So you're going to need some metrics that show how well your workforce is ascending the learning curve on using these tools. Are they getting more and more effective? Can you achieve savings and productivity improvements that exceed the 30% benchmark that we've set inside the industry? And you're going to make sure that you have indicators that are forward-looking, that are current, and are lagging as well. So you're going to acquire this data so you can really track progress over time. As I mentioned before, in the August 2024 survey, very, very recent, 20% of companies find that they're meeting and exceeding their needs. For the 42% that still see room for improvement, you have to ask yourself, are you investing appropriately in the people and the processes to wring the most value out of the generative AI platform itself? And likewise, for the 38% that are not delivering expected benefits, ask yourself, are you really using the tool to best effect? If you are not achieving those expected benefits, were they realistic in the first place, or perhaps you have not invested sufficiently in your people? So again, what we're seeing with GenAI adoption overall, 40% are using it. These are your competitors. They are already today realizing benefits and advantages from the use of generative AI to help them with business development. Almost 40% interested, but have yet to implement. Again, they're always going to be first adopters. We have a lot to learn from those companies that are really out there spearheading the adoption of generative AI. Some companies want to stand back and understand what the implications are, what the lessons learned are. That strikes me as a very reasonable thing, as long as you've got a plan to make sure you get on the train before it's too late, because those companies are building differentiating and discriminating advantages into their business development processes. And again, roughly 20% are skeptical and have no interest. I think that's a number that's probably going to decline somewhat over time, but there always will be companies that choose not to adopt generative AI as well, will stick with what they've got, and that's fine too. So I've given you the results of a number of surveys that Lofeld did in a variety of places, LinkedIn, APMP, other sources, over the last year. And what we were kind of learning from those companies that have considered or thought about adopting GenAI, and a number of companies that really are not considering it as well. What I'd like to do is share with you now some observations from the experience of our consultants who are out there supporting customers today and who are using generative AI to make themselves, again, more effective and more proficient. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that one important thing is to focus on a limited number of core use cases. Don't try to boil the ocean on all the different things that generative AI can possibly do for you inside your enterprise once you've adopted it. I state this as an observation because we've worked with customers. We have an immersion program. We bring customers in to work a live bid and a tenant. We provide a couple AI trained proposal experts to work with them. One of the observations we have is people start learning what AI can do for them. They want to immediately branch out and apply it everywhere because the power is so self-evident. GenAI's ability to save you time generating rough draft text, and even in some cases, high quality, almost proposal quality output with very limited human intervention and very, very quickly is really impressive. People want to expand out and start using it for everything right away. You're going to have to be able careful to manage those use cases to bring your workforce up together in parallel. So your processes are ready, your interfaces are ready for people to make best possible use. You may want to consider a capability maturity model. There is a BD capability maturity model out there already to evaluate your processes, which can range from initial, where your processes are really your work in an area might be largely ad hoc. We reinvent it every time, all the way up through highly automated, highly organized, continuous process improvement type of a capability. And there's a spectrum of scores in between. You want to ask yourself again, where does GenAI give me the biggest bang for the buck? And maybe you want to hold off in investing in those lesser value use cases until you've really thoroughly integrated GenAI into your processes where you get the most return on your investment. Now, in order to do this, in order to understand the capability maturity model and the return on investment you're going to get from GenAI, you need to collect hour cost and quality data. By hours and cost, how many hours of labor is involved in accomplishing a task? Do we see a change with the use of generative AI? What is the cost of that labor? Are these your top experts in the company? Are these the people who really are, the core of your proposal workforce? Who are they? And then quality data. How much does the product improve and how much residual time is required for humans, again, potentially assisted by GenAI to finish the task? So I mentioned before what were the most commonly observed applications of GenAI in the survey that we ran in September of 2023. And most of those use cases focused on writing intensive activities, especially proposal text preparation. But in 2023, we surveyed internally inside Lowfeld itself, our consultants. We identified 39 distinct proposal use cases already in place in 2023, which was really the first year of adoption. And even now, again, as you can see, companies are still experimenting and learning really fully what GenAI can do for them in the proposal room. One of the key lessons that we've learned, our proposal experts have learned, is that GenAI is a productivity and quality tool. It can help you do things faster, better, cheaper, but it's not a data retrieval platform. It is not deterministic. It's not a database or a spreadsheet where you put the same thing in, you get the same thing out. It is creative. It is language driven. And because of that, it has its own skill set that you need to teach your workforce to get the best possible use out of GenAI. So on the left of this chart, you can see there's a BD life cycle representation, and we've got those areas where you do proposal-related work, pre-RFP, during the proposal development, and then post-submission as well. And those items on the right in italics are areas we have already worked on use cases. We applied GenAI in order to facilitate the proposal process here. We use it for solutioning to develop ideas and draft artifacts that you can then use to respond to the RFP when it's ready. So this is really a kind of a capture-related activity as well as proposal-related activity. But GenAI has an enormous store of knowledge in its large language model that you can supplement with your own information on how you will choose to solve a problem, to present a solution or an approach or a capability that addresses the customer's need. GenAI can help with that. Again, as I've mentioned repeatedly now, GenAI is great at giving you draft proposal content, with drafting narrative, with reviewing, all the sorts of things that are text, narrative, and language intensive. And then post-submittal, you can just generate a process customer feedback. You can use it to extract information from a Word debrief, CPARS, information like that. You can build and manage a library of information that you can then search thematically, not word search, but search for ideas semantically, search for meaning to extract profound insight into what customers are telling you across your enterprise or even just in one specific customer base. So it's important not to underestimate generative AI's ability to be creative, to come up with ideas and have you think about things that maybe just are outside the box or outside of the environment in which you work. Now, you may or may not adopt those ideas, that's fine. But it's very, very valuable to have a participant in your process, the generative AI platform itself, submit ideas for consideration by the people who are ultimately going to determine. I say by the people who determine, make the decision on what your technical approach and solution and management approach and solution are going to be. And then you can use GenAI to help develop the artifacts, analyze the RFP, and generate proposal-related artifacts, help with writing, and then do the quality reviews as well. But I think an area you want to consider is that GenAI can be creative in helping you with ideas for how you're going to proceed with your capture and with your bid. So let me summarize. So roughly today, we believe from the surveys we've done and people we're talking to that about 75% of GovCon companies are in the stage of proceeding with their generative AI adoption journey. Some have adopted it and are moving ahead with full implementation. Others are in a much earlier stage where they're still studying and piloting and talking to vendors, but they are moving along with GenAI adoption. There's tremendous pressure from investors, from the C-suite to understand how generative AI can help you. It's clear to us at Lowfeld that generative AI can help you write more proposals, save money, be more efficient, and also win more. If you have a robust set of best practices and you adapt the Gen AI to follow your best practices, your lessons learned on how to win. And again, it's been less than 2 years. So for those of you who are saying, oh, we're entering the trough of disillusionment that I showed you in the earlier chart, I would contend, I think we're just learning really what it takes to really get the value out of Gen AI. We're now experiencing that on a scale that was not available to us in the first year or 2 years of adoption. I think it's progressing just fine. You have to ask yourself, as you move ahead with your Gen AI adoption journey, are you investing appropriately in organizational change management? You need to get your chief HR officer or equivalent involved so they can help you understand what the impacts are on your processes and your people. And then you need to make sure that you have a good business forecast, a good business plan. Make sure you have reasonable expectations for what it's going to cost. Don't overlook sustainment cost. Don't overlook organizational change management investment that you have to make. Don't overlook the trade-offs in performance and cost for your make, buy, lease, and hosting decisions. If you would like assistance in adopting generative AI, not only for in the proposal room or in the capture process, but adapting your processes, understanding implications, assessing your BD maturity, Lowfeld Consulting Group can help you with that. We offer a generative AI for proposal professionals training class. It's 3.5 days, where basically your people get hands-on experience taught by a user, a proposal person, who will show you how to use generative AI to best effect to be efficient and cost-effective. We're also in the process of releasing an executive training class, roughly about 3 to 4 hours, to have your executives get an in-depth understanding of how generative AI can be used by them to improve business development processes. We have a business transformation program where you can have immersion for up to 20 of your people working on a live bid. We will provide AI-trained proposal experts who will help them accomplish their proposal-related tasks for a real bid. So you're not taking those people off of their work and spending an extended training period on them. And rather, we will help coach and facilitate the environment for them so they get the work done and master Gen AI at the same time. And then finally, we've trained all of our 100+ proposal experts on how to use AI. So if you have an AI environment set up, or you're beginning to set one up, or you're experimenting with it, and you would like AI-trained proposal assistance, Lowfeld can help you. And of course, Lowfeld Consulting Group can continue to help you with your capture and proposal preparation services. We have experts in the areas of proposal management, writing, graphics, desktop publishing, capture, anything you really need for proposal and capture related assistance. We know how to use it with Gen AI to help you. If you're not ready with your Gen AI adoption journey yet, we can also help you follow your best practices with experts and know how to win. If you'd like more information, you can see the Lowfeld web page up there with lots of information up there. We also have a number of books. If you'd be interested in getting a copy of one of these books, including, by the way, the last one on the right called Insights on How You Use Gen AI to Write Winning Proposals, please reach out to me directly and we'll connect you with our publishing department.